Okay, so let's start our exploration of our resources. And the way I like to explore our resources is to do so investigating a particular hypothetical. So I'm going to present that to you now, and then we will start our discussion on how to proceed with the research. So I walk into your door as a new client. New clients are always a good thing. I live and work in New York. As it happens, I was born with a heart defect and decided it's about time I should go to a cardiologist just to make sure everything's okay. Cardiologists, you may or may not know, are supremely expensive. So I wanted to check with my health insurance, an HMO, to make sure that they were going to cover it for me because, as I said, cardiologists are super expensive. My HMO said, nah, there's nothing wrong with you. We're not going to cover you. Go and see your cardiologist. So couldn't really afford it. Librarians, you may or may not know, aren't paid all that much, though I'm doing okay. So I didn't go. And about 6 months later, I had a heart attack. Now, actually, I didn't personally really have a heart attack, but for our hypothetical, your client had a heart attack. And when I went to the doctors after the heart attack, they said, you know, if you had gone and gotten this checked out, we might have spotted something and could have prevented this. So that made me even more upset. So I decided I wanted to sue my health plan, the HMO, for denying care of a cardiologist, or for denying coverage of a cardiologist's care. Okay, so as your client, you can ask me additional questions. So what's the first thing you're going to do? This is what you do for a living. Danielle? New York? But yeah, you definitely want to know the jurisdiction. Yeah, absolutely. Josh? Pardon me? 50. Sleeping. It's a good thing I didn't. In serious, I personally have never had one, but this is good. You want to get the facts from your client. Jessica?
What is your heart defect? Is it a condition?
It is a condition. It's called pulmonary stenosis.
Did you tell your insurance?
Yeah, they know. They know my whole history.
Did they give you a reason why you shouldn't, or why they wouldn't cover a cardiologist then?
No, they didn't. That's an interesting question.
Who is the insurance provider specifically?
Empire. Well, I was born with a birth defect. Okay.
What were your medical bills for the heart attack?
Oh, you know, I have the medical bills. I didn't total them, but it was over $10,000. I'll bring the bills in and get that. And Rosa, and then Jessica.
We could apply to the heart attack if it was pre-existing condition, you already have a treatment.
Well, I was born with the birth defect. I had surgery for it when I was 3 years old, but it hasn't been a problem since then.
That answers my question.
Okay.
Have you ever seen a cardiologist before?
When I was younger, a lot until after the surgery. I had surgery when I was 3 years old, and then after the surgery a bunch of times to make sure I was okay, and then until I was like 15 once every 3 years, and then after I was 15.
So the last time you saw a cardiologist was about 3 years ago?
No, the last time I saw a cardiologist was about 20 years ago. Or 30. About 50, yeah, about 30. Amy?
I don't know if you answered
Okay, so definitely good. You want to ask client questions. So at least once you've asked your initial questions, what comes next?
You get your client's medical records.
Okay, so you do some additional fact investigation.
You probably want to see the contract with the insurance company.
You want to get, again, good, definitely want to see what the insurance company, what the contract is with the insurance. So again, getting that additional information, that's something that I, the client, can get for you, or you, the attorney, can contact the insurance company. We don't have that yet, but absolutely. So eventually we want to get to research, right? This is a research class after all. So assuming we are working on all those other areas, what do you do next to start your research?
Google.
Okay, so good old Google. Great place to start, absolutely. What are we Googling? How do we know, I have to type something into Google, right? How do I know when I'm typing into Google? We first might want to do some form of issue spotting. Remember issue spotting? From all of your classes that you have issue spotting questions, and from first year, I think you may or may not remember when you were first years, two of the librarians came into your first year class to talk about research, and we did issue spotting. Now, you don't have to sit down with a pretty colored spreadsheet to do it, but you want to sit down and just, before you put fingers to keyboard, think about, what am I researching, right? You don't want to spin your wheels. You don't want to waste your time. We talked about doing efficient research. Part of efficient research is targeting your time. So the good thing about issue spotting is it starts to make you think about what those fingers are going to type on that keyboard, what terms you're going to use to search, and that also will start you thinking about where you're going to search. One way I like to do issue spotting, mostly just because it's easy and I can remember it and I don't need a fancy spreadsheet like this, is the classic, what they do in journalism: who, what, when, where, why, how, and we'll talk about that last bit, legal theories, in a little bit. So let's do some issue spotting. Who are we talking about? And not, again, who are we talking about in terms of what you might use for research? Obviously, you're not going to type in Lisa. Priscilla, and then Jessica. Still working on you. Okay, policyholder. Okay, who else? Jessica.
I would say 50-year-old woman with pulmonary
History, pulmonary stenosis. I think I spelled that right. Who else? Insurance company? Say no? No?
Try directly with Empire.
Would Empire be a search term we would use? Okay, but you think about when you, but what if you find a resource that talks about Aetna?
You can still use it, but I'm just saying it could be more effective if you find the actual insurance company if they lost a suit on your case.
Okay, well, we'll put it in there, but I think, again, when you're researching, looking for either cases or statutes or secondary sources, you don't want to necessarily limit yourself to a particular company, individual. Other?
cardiologist.
Okay, we'll put it down. This is all brainstorming issue spotting, so we'll put down everything and then decide what's the most relevant. You're all missing a key player. We're not missing, but not quite characterizing a key player. Mentioned it a couple of times. The insurance company is what kind of insurance company? Say it again? HMO. Do you know what that HMO stands for?
Not really, but you need the referral to see the doctor.
Right, that's a particular style of health coverage. So what would be a way we would find what HMO stands for? Google it, yeah, okay. So, someone want to Google it real quick while we... So while Googling, so what do we want to happen? Want to happen is a question you'll probably ask yourself more frequently in more transactional type issues. What happened is more in this kind of issue where something happened and now your client, excuse me, wants to sue. So what happened? And again, you should have your lawyer's hat on. Okay. But why is that relevant for you as her lawyer?
Because the insurance company said that there was nothing wrong, so you need to go to the cardiologist.
Okay. Let's hold on to that for a while. So, anybody else on what happened? Josh? Okay, so denied coverage. You're not suing because she was born with a heart defect. Fortunately, no one can sue for that, but I know where you were going with that. Okay. Okay. So where are we? New York. That one's usually pretty straightforward. When did this happen? Do we know? Well,
Or do you mean when did she get denied?
well, when did her cause of action, remember we've got to think about when the cause of action accrued because we've got to think about statute of limitations. So either her heart attack or probably, depends on what we're going to sue for, whomever we're suing. So I guess that's a good way of thinking of the who is who's suing and who's being sued. So we already said the HMO. So we kind of answered that. So what are they suing for? Talked about denial of coverage. And what do they want to happen? Let's see if I can rephrase that. So they're suing for denial of coverage. So what do they, when they sue whoever they're suing, they want, what are they suing for? What are they trying to prove? So they're trying to show that the insurance company, what? Okay, so this gets back to the when did the insurance company's bad action happen? That's something we have to go back to the client, right? Because we kind of got a sense it was recent, but we really don't know. So as the client, I'm going to tell you last year in March. So we will say 3/2018. So that makes sure we falls. We don't have to worry about the statute of limitations. Because obviously you don't want to spend all these hours doing these research and drafting documents to find out this happened 20 years ago and you're out of luck. Okay, and the money question, which we Now, the thing about doing this issue spotting, the who, what, where, when, why, how, don't really worry about what column you put it in. If I put it in what and it should be in why, as long as you have the important aspect down. The point of the questions in the columns is to get that out and to start to think about it. Okay. So and especially the what and the why, they tend to blend together. So I'm blending them together now because there's just no great way to separate them, and there's no point in worrying about separating them. So the what happened, why are we suing, why do we need a lawyer, how can the law help? And if any of those questions help, then that's a good thing and put it down. So we're suing, so I think my who we're suing and who's getting sued and why are we suing them. So, and this gets into the legal theories. Why are we suing them? We're not going to go into court and say, we're suing because she had a heart attack. We're suing because denied coverage. Okay, so we have that. That's good, but they denied coverage. And what do we want to happen when we sue? Well, what are we suing for? Okay, so we're suing for money damages. And those money damages would be awarded if the insurance company, if the HMO is what? Liable. And what would they be liable for? Okay, negligence. What else? So one good way, and I'll be with you in a second, just sorry, a couple of other people raised their hand. One good way to sometimes think about this is think about what class would this come under? So would this be contracts? Would this be torts? Would this be corporations? Would this be or some of your constitutional law? What are some of the other substantive classes? Where would this come under?
Breach of contract.
So possibly breach of contract, because you're talking about the insurance company contract. What else? Jessica, did you have an idea you wanted to add or a separate one? Either one is fine.
I believe there's something like they acted in bad faith. There's bad faith denial of coverage, something like that.
Okay, so if they acted in bad faith, that might be something we wanted to investigate, find out exactly why they denied coverage. Your client doesn't know, but there's probably some process that they went through to determine whether they were going to cover or not. Other thoughts? Okay. You don't have to go on forever. You don't have to fill out the whole column. What's our question presented? If you had to write a complaint and you had to do question presented, that I am going to answer. What is it?
Maybe whether or not the insurance company breaches contract by denying coverage.
Contract for denying coverage. The problem with this spreadsheet is it centers things, but more basically, what are we trying to accomplish? Josh. Is insurance company liable to policy holder when deny coverage? Now that could apply for car insurance, right? Or fire insurance, or do we want to be a little more specific? Because that's going to be a whole different issue than Well, but isn't the type of insurance company going to make a difference here? Oh, right. Somebody found what HMOs stand for. And actually it's health maintenance. So, and the point I'm making there is if people are going to throw around acronyms, people are going to throw around acronyms that they don't even know what it stands for. Just make sure you know what it stands for, and Google's a perfectly fine way to do that. So is HMO liable? So rather than, okay, because let's think about our facts. Our client had a heart attack. What if our client had a stroke? Is it going to make a difference for what we're researching? What if our client wanted to go to a gastroenterologist, if I'm even pronouncing that, because of some digestive issue, and then they got denied coverage for that? So you want to think carefully about which facts are extraordinarily important, but you want to play law professor and ask yourself, well, does a heart attack mention, or what if it's something else? Well, no, we want to find out if the HMO is liable, right? Priscilla. Well, that's a good question. We don't know the answer. So what you want to do is ask yourself, remember, questions, really important. Ask yourself the question, but start out with the basics, but keep that in mind is, okay, I have to see if pre-existing condition makes a difference or not. So maybe you need to find out if your client was denied coverage because it's a pre-existing condition. Actually, right now, under the Affordable Care Act, insurance companies can't deny coverage for pre-existing condition. So again, you want to investigate with the insurance company, find out, why did you deny? And that's something, as your client's attorney, you can write them an official letter, or you can ask your client to say, you know, go call your company and ask them to find out, because as a patient, as a policyholder, you're entitled to go back and say, hey, why did you deny me coverage? Or you're entitled to dispute it, which is maybe something you want to do. So again, you want, asking questions, absolutely what you want to be doing, but you want to think about what are the questions you want to, what are the basic questions you need to answer first before you get to the other possibilities. Okay. So we had a suggestion to Google. So let's go to Google, and I'm going to put in HMO liability, mostly because, as you can see, I'm a crummy typist. And if I type much more than that, we're going to spend forever watching me correct it. Okay, Google is totally great to start with. It's free, absolutely. So when we start to think about costs, and again, we'll talk about that in a little bit later, good place to go. Certainly easy, so not going to spend a lot of time figuring out how to use Google, but you also want to think about time efficiency in how good are the results you're getting back, and also how reliable are the facts you're getting back. So we take a look here, and I see this cga.ct.gov. You want to learn, if you don't already know, and many of you probably already know, how to read the web address, or it's called a URL if you didn't know that. So ct.gov is telling me this is Connecticut government. We're in New York. I'm not really interested in looking in Connecticut government, so again, I don't want to waste my time. Legalmatch.com. No idea what that is. Sounds a little like a dating website. It's not, I'm just kidding. It's probably a website to help you find attorneys. How good is that going to be in telling me what the law is? Maybe worth looking at anyway. I don't know. NCBI, that's NIH.gov, a National Institute of Health. That might be interesting looking at. ManageCareMag.com, Reed Smith, that may be a law firm. So when you Google, you got to be, unlike Lexis and Westlaw, which again are very much more expensive, but when you Google, you have no idea what these sites are. So you want to start to think about that. And so to get our thoughts in that mode.
Got
I got 90.
I'm going to turn to Stephen Colbert as promised. See, I keep my promises. This is actually the old Stephen Colbert. He's not the current one. I actually miss the old Stephen Colbert. I like the current one's good too, but this one is particularly relevant. So it's a little bit dated, as you'll see from some of the political references, but still kind of worth watching, I think. Okay, so a little old politically, but hopefully starts to get you thinking about what we can rely on, both with regard to Wikipedia, which I'm sure you've heard many times, never, ever, ever cite, although it's not bad to just take a look at to get some background, but also generally websites. If Stephen Colbert can go and change a website, anybody with access to the web can go and post a website and create any fact they want. I mean, we've all heard the term fake news these days, right? A lot of that comes from the web. Okay, so with that in mind, I'd like to start today's exercise, and we're going to think about how we go about figuring out what we can rely on when we look at the web. So to do that, I'm going to ask you to go on the course website. If anybody can't get to the course website, I have you can type in. Does anybody need this? Can everybody get to the course website? Okay, great. So on the course website, we are going to go to modules, and we are going to go to intro. So our intro module, and in our intro module, you will see class 1 workshop. Everybody good so far? And when we click on the workshop, it'll forward us on to basically a form here. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to answer basically just a handful of questions. So what you're going to do is the directions say here, you're going, another hypothetical, you are doing just temporarily, you're doing research on bullying. I'm going to ask you to look at both of these websites, Site 1 and Site 2. And evaluate the trustworthiness of each as a source of information about bullying. Okay, I'm interested in your take. You can stay on the page, you can leave the page, whatever you typically do to figure out if you can trust the information on that site. Answer the questions below. So you're going to answer, would you rely? And then you're going to give a short answer as to explain why you chose your answer. And that's going to happen for both sites. And then the last question is just going to ask you to tell us what site you think is more reliable. I'm going to give you 10 minutes for that. And then we'll talk about your results and a little bit more about relying on the web. If you finish before 10 minutes, give me a wave. If you have any questions, give me a wave. Any confusion, questions? So since I created this, I'm looking at the response form. This is a Google form if any of you are into using the various features of Google. So let's take a look at the responses. Okay, so we have, just pull out my, so for the first site, 70% of you decided that it was indeed reliable. And let's see some of the reasons. The URL.org, website.org, first I'd say reliable because it ends in, oh, a lot of you are like the fact that it was a .org. Looks more reliable and trustworthy, defines references and uses them at the bottom in order to, oh, so you have reference, you like the fact that it have references. They cite doctors. National organization, currently up to date, copyright. Oh, so you looked at the copyright date, okay. Listed references, so another person likes the fact they listed references. Mission statement seems they have a bias toward a certain lifestyle choices. Therefore, the information they release may not be entirely accurate. Okay, so not everybody, so that was probably in the 30% that didn't rely on it. Ability to locate probably is some base in practicing pediatricians. Okay, the print is small enough. I have to put on my glasses here. Let's see, website talk about bullying, how it occurs, clear definition. Presence of outside social media pages for legitimacy, the contact information provided, the last time it was updated. I do not believe the source is trustworthy. College is effectively a think tank with its own agenda and goals, or information which might be true in some way can be skewed and used to further their goals and mislead research, deliver junk science, misleading research, and attempt to achieve its goal. I considered SPL and the website About Us section. I'm not sure what SPL stands for, but
Probably wasn't.
okay. Thank you. Information by pediatric.org indicates pediatric organization. There are reputable references. Again, so it seems like for those who found it reliable, the fact that it was a .org, the fact that they listed references, the fact that they referenced doctors, and that first site was the college site. Let's take a look at the second. So a few more of you. 80% of you liked the second site. Same reasons as above. Do not trust because the form lack resources made me think less trusting resources, telling about an event rather than relying on proper information. They were talking, that second site was talking about an event. From the AAP, which seems like a reliable organization, need to click further to evaluate the organization to determine whether or not I can trust the source. Little skeptical, doesn't state whether where the information is from or who the author is. The .org, written by an organization of 67,000 pediatricians. Cite reputable sources, so again, citing sources. Several chapters, professional resources, multi-year journal. Oh, someone happens to know the American Academy of Pediatrics to be a trustworthy organization, a lot of information. The link belongs to a professional association. This goes to expend, helping people. Doesn't talk much about bullying. Okay, so some people knew of the organization. Again, the .org. The lack of references made some people, at least one person, a little more skeptical. So it looks like Site 2, just under half of you thought Site 2 was more reliable. About a third of you thought Site 1 was more reliable, and 20% of you not quite weren't sure. Okay, so this exercise was based on this article that I read a year or so ago, where they pretty much did a study using this exact exercise, and I just adapted it for our purposes. So they basically wanted to see how different groups of people determine trustworthiness of a website. So they developed this, so here is their description of the site, so their determination of the trustworthiness of each site. So talks about articles about bullying, websites. So the American Academy of Pediatrics, that was the second site you looked at, and the American College of Pediatricians, the college, was the first site you looked at. Despite similarity, two organizations couldn't be more different. The Academy was established back in 1932 as the largest professional organization with 64,000 members. It looks like it's gone up since this article was written by whomever tracked down the 67,000 number. So the Academy publishes Pediatrics, the field's flagship journal, and offers continuing education in a variety of subjects. By comparison, the college is a splinter group that in 2002 broke from the parent organization over the issue of adoption by same-sex couples. It is estimated to have between 200 and 500 members. This group has come under withering criticism for its anti-gay stance, its advocacy of reparative therapy, which is currently outlawed in some states, and incendiary posts. One advocates adding, woven into their agenda. So essentially the college has a particular political stance, and the Academy is got a much wider, more respected view, is considered more respected. So what's interesting is this study looked at several different had several different groups of people do exactly what you just did. And the different groups of people were fact checkers. So people, you hear about fact checkers all the time, right? If you listen to the news. And then professionally trained historians, so people with PhDs in history, so very well educated people in the history field, and students, actually college students. And you can see that the fact checkers were able to determine, 100% of them were able to determine that the Academy website was the more reliable one correctly. Interestingly, the historians, again, people with very well-educated PhD historians, only 50% of them were able to identify that the Academy was, in fact, the more trustworthy site. 40% of them thought weren't sure, and 10% of them thought the college was more reliable. And students, only 20% of them were able to determine that the Academy was, in fact, the more trustworthy site. 64 of them thought the college was more reliable, and 16% weren't sure. So what did these students do to come to these conclusions, which really turned out not to be the case? So the authors of this study looked into that, and they found in the past studies that found that college students rarely considered even where the information came from when evaluating reliability. So they didn't even think about where the origin was, or that it was reliable at all. And if they did, they were more likely to judge a website based on its relevance to the searching needs. So did it talk about the topic? But of course, something can talk about the topic and be very biased, as it seems the college very likely is in certain areas anyway. College students also look at its appearance and how easy it is to navigate. Of course, we all like sites that look nice and are easy to find our way around. But that doesn't necessarily mean what the information contains is going to be reliable. So that's how students evaluate. Some of their rationale for how they came to their conclusion is they see an abstract. They really liked how it was laid out, or their bullet points are always easier to look through. There's more information. So that was some of the basis for the college students. Looking at the basis for, again, PhD historians. Historians were often taken in by the college's name and logo. It's .org domain. A few of you also found that important. Its layout and aesthetics, just like the college students, and its scientific appearance, complete with abstract references and articles authored by medical doctors. So a few of you thought just like PhD historians. Reading the Bullying at School article, particular historian comment, the presence of scientific, abstract, and references. So this is a way of judging that a lot of people, a lot of highly educated people do and can easily be swayed by. So some of the specific comments from the historians. So again, they say one feature played a key role in shaping historians' judgment, the presence of references. So the idea of someone citing to something and giving the citation seems to convey a sense of reliability, but of course, as we know, you can cite to just about anything. So again, we see that a lot of the historians talked about references to standard scientific literature, citing real journals. So let's now take a look at what the fact checkers, who had 100% success rate in finding which was indeed more reliable. And the authors of this study call what the fact checkers do taking bearings. So what fact checkers did, one fact checker said, the first thing I would do is see if I can find anything on the organization. He said as he typed the organization's name into Google. He clicked on Wikipedia's entry about the college and read that it's Socially Conservative Association of Pediatricians, founded in 2002 as a protest, as we already heard about, against the American Academy. So taking a look at some of the comments that the fact checkers did in determining, one thing the fact checkers did, they checked about us. I think somebody mentioned that in their comments, that they looked about us in the college website. Another fact checker opened another tab just to read a little bit more. Maybe that was the fact checker that looked at Wikipedia. So what the authors of this study tried to do is put together a method, a process for how can we check reliability, and they looked to what the fact checkers who got 100% accuracy did. Now I'm scrolling down to what they call the lateral reading process. This is for another study or a different part of the study they did looking at different websites, but the same exact process applies to what you all did. So they had the other website they had their study participants look at is this minimumwage.com. And what the fact checkers did is they started first at the About page, at the page they were asked to evaluate. So again, at least one of you did that with our websites. And then from the About page, they checked out the the responsible organization. So they went to that responsible organization's homepage, and they went to that About page. EPI is the name of the responsible organization. So again, looking at the About page, but then they decided to Google, in addition to just reading what the organization says about itself, because right, you can say whatever you want about yourself, they decided to Google the responsible organization, EPI. And when they Googled it, they found an article by SourceWatch, and then within that SourceWatch article, they found an NPR article. So the idea of lateral, going across the web and not just looking at the page itself. And again, also being critical about us. So even if you look at About Us, again, you need to remember that anybody can say anything they want about themselves, and it's usually going to be pretty self-complimentary. So as we see here, despite the nonpartisan declarations, this other website, minimumwage.com, and its responsible organization, Employment Policies Institute, EPI, are products of this Berman & Company, a DC-based public relations firm that lobbies on behalf of restaurant and hotel insurance industries. So it's got a particular viewpoint. They represent people. Their specialty, in the words of the New York Times, is to create official-sounding nonprofit groups to disseminate information on behalf of corporate clients. So basically, they're organizations that create websites that are nonprofits to try to sound like they're reliable because they're .org. So again, a lot of you thinking .org is a reason to rely on a page. Well, you might want to think about that because they're organizations that create .orgs just to promote a particular viewpoint. Question? Sure.
You don't have to register. Aside from the .fed or .gov, you don't have to register. Anybody can just buy it.
Yeah.
And it's an old marketing trick. Like you need to create trustworthiness and have sort of sense of responsibility to client.
Exactly. As we see, some folks relied on .org. Anybody can purchase a domain for .org. It's not even that expensive. I think it's a handful of dollars a month. So you really want to be pretty careful about what you rely on and follow some of these steps that we saw in the lateral reading process. And it really, you don't need to do this every single website, but if you're going to start to rely on it, you want to look at the About Us. You want to do a little separate Google search just to find out who are these people. Even find out who's responsible if there's a different organization that's responsible. Find out who these people are, and then read in some other independent source, trustworthy. If you trust NPR or SourceWatch or the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, if you can find information about them. Okay, so now that we've done an exercise and started to think about how we can determine what to rely on, let's go back to Google and take a look at a couple of these. Now, I'm not going to go through the exercise with each and every one of these because, frankly, we don't have time. But now that we have Google, we're going to take a quick look. So the very top hit, you always look at the top hit at Google if it sounds remotely useful, right? So this very top hit, this legalmatch.com. And so it's giving us some information. So it looks like it is a find a lawyer. So we might, so it tells us a little bit about HMO liability, and tells us HMO, health maintenance organizations, in case we hadn't figured that out yet. And it actually refers us to the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, as might be relevant with regard to when laws regarding an HMO can be Let me start over. The laws regarding when an HMO can be liable for malpractice. So there, we hadn't thought about that. Maybe we can sue this HMO for malpractice. So part of what you want to start doing, even with your Googling, even if I'm never going to rely on that, is it's okay to get ideas from it, right? They're not, so I might want to think about whether malpractice is a cause of action, is a legal theory that I might want to try out. Talks about arbitration and talks about damages, so I might read this to educate myself without ever relying on it. Going back to our results, this .gov turns out this just gives me a blank screen. I don't know why, so that's a disappointment. Might want to look, find out, again, do the same process with this Managed Care Mag. I have no idea what that is, but maybe I can learn a little bit from it. Down here, this turns out to be a law firm. Now, you'll hear different law librarians say different things about relying on law firms. I won't tell you never go to a law firm, but what I will tell you is don't trust it. Maybe you can learn, but don't trust and then verify is, I guess, what I would say about law firm sites, because they can tell you about the law and their fellow lawyers, so they'll refer you to what you're interested in, statutes, cases, explanation, but I wouldn't rely on it because they're trying to generate business. A law firm website exists to generate business. So they're going to try to interest potential clients, mostly non-lawyers, by maybe characterizing things that might not be as something you as a lawyer want to rely on. But you can get background from this law firm on what is an HMO. Again, I wouldn't rely on it, but I might learn a little bit. Again, that concept of malpractice. Okay, so again, as we go through thinking about what the website is and how we want to use it. Another thing you want to do is try more than one search. We tried HMO liability. Another part of our issue was the fact that our HMO denied care, or I put denial, you could put denial of care. Again, I'm just being conservative in what I type because this way I avoid typos. And we had a whole bunch of other terms you could try as well. If you wanted to try pre-existing condition or heart attack or empire, nothing wrong with it. Don't go down a rabbit hole and spend hours and hours because, again, your time is money and you want to be efficient. Also, here we see up top healthcare provider rights and responsibilities, and what we see is an ny.gov. So that's telling me it's New York government website. I am going to tend to trust a little more. If we looked at this, we don't really have the time to read through it carefully, but you'd scroll down and you'd see that it actually doesn't really tell us a whole lot, unfortunately. But looking at government websites is a good practice. We see that legal match again. And sometimes you even want to try to go to the next page. I will confess that I don't often do that. But once in a while, I'll go through a couple. I'm not going to go through 10,000 results because, again, time is money. But I might go through a few pages and just scroll quickly looking at the websites and say, oh, look, here's another .gov. Again, that NIH, I happen to know is National Institute of Health. Even if you don't know, if you see a .gov. And this turns out, even though it's kind of old, it's 2005, so I know that the law could have changed. The law could have changed entirely, and I can't rely on anything, but it might give me some ideas, just like we got the idea about malpractice. And what this also turns out this does, again, health plan liability, so another term it's giving us. So we talked about HMO, we talked about insurance. There's also the term health plan might be relevant. And again, this ERISA, this Employee Retirement Income Security Act, we got that reference from the first site we looked at. So that's sounding like we may need to investigate this ERISA thing. And so now we're getting some background on how the U.S. healthcare delivery system is regulated and maze of overlapping state and federal. I'm of course not going to read the whole thing. But look, here's a section on health plan liability. Again, even if it's totally out of date, I might learn even just terminology. So, and it's also, I might learn ideas. So right here, this first sentence, 2 types of liability, contract and tort. So it's giving me my legal theories. We talked about contract and tort, malpractice. For you PI folks, this might be a personal injury issue after all. Are relevant in litigating involving health plans, contracts, and it goes into some explanation. And if you scroll down again, it's going to give us reference to that ERISA. If I keep on seeing the same reference over and over, I'm going to say, okay, I'm at least going to investigate it. I'm not going to rely on this. It's 2005, so I'm not going to rely on it to tell me what the law, ERISA law is today, but I am going to look at it to learn about ERISA, maybe even get a citation to see if it's still current. And then it even starts to talk about case law. Again, old, 2005, but if it starts me with a case, I can use our case research tools, which we'll talk about in a couple months, to find more recent cases. Okay, so we've done pretty well, I think, by Google. Again, keeping in mind what we can, what we do want to rely on and what we're going to be a little more suspicious of. Any questions? Okay. So now, as promised, I'm going to talk a little bit about costs of Lexis and Westlaw. I'm not going to talk about costs of Bloomberg because Bloomberg is a flat fee. So if you go work for an organization that subscribes to Bloomberg, it's what they call all you can eat. You can search Bloomberg 24/7. I wouldn't suggest it for your sanity's sake, but you can spend as much time as you want on Bloomberg, and it doesn't cost any more than it would if you spent 2 minutes on Bloomberg. Lexis and Westlaw, totally different story. Let's take a look first at Westlaw, and the reason I want to take a look first at Westlaw, and one of the handouts I had you pick up is the pricing guide for Westlaw, because when I pull it up on the screen, it's probably not going to be readable, especially to those of you in the back. And this pricing guide is actually linked to way at the bottom of Westlaw here, pricing guide. And we'll notice, before we do that, just because I mentioned it earlier, Westlaw looks different. I don't know how many of you have already seen this. If you're Westlaw users, you probably have. But it's now called Westlaw Edge, and it's blue. There are other changes that they've made that are more substantive. They've added some AI, artificial intelligence, and we'll talk about that as the semester progresses. But honestly, it works kind of the same as it did last year when it wasn't blue. But that pricing guide link that we're looking at here on the handout is here at the bottom of the page. And the reason why I'm starting with this pricing guide is what you'll notice on the top of the columns are 3 different columns on the right-hand side: hourly, offline delivery, and transactional. So Lexis and Westlaw, actually, I don't even know if it's true for Lexis. Westlaw definitely still gives organizations the option to go with hourly billing. That means really minute by minute billing, so it charges you for every minute you're on Westlaw, or it allows you to choose transactional billing. Transactional is a transaction, a search, viewing a document. What you're looking at are basically the costs for hourly versus transactional for materials that are outside of an organization's plan. The way both Lexis and Westlaw work is that each individual organization, they sell a plan. So they could give you, you could buy the plan that has every single, absolutely everything that's available on Lexis, or if you're with Westlaw, let's stick with Westlaw for the moment. So everything that's on Westlaw, that's obviously going to cost a whole lot more per month than if you only go with a narrower plan, say that usually smaller organizations will go with, say, their state materials. Maybe they'll only go for their state primary materials, so cases, statutes. So you might, if you're hanging out your own shingle, you may start with the Westlaw subscription that only has, if you're in New York statutes and New York cases and New York regulations. You know, I forgot to ask you in the beginning, who here is planning on staying in New York when they start practicing? Okay, who here is planning on leaving New York? Okay, where are you planning on going?
I want to stay in New York for a little bit, but then go to Florida.
Okay, so Florida, where else? Back to Florida? Any other? I ask mostly just because when I do jurisdiction examples, I like to use jurisdictions people are interested in. So we'll be using Florida. Any, Allison, you look like you were thinking about? Pennsylvania. Oh, of course, Pennsylvania. That's where you're from. Okay, so Florida, Pennsylvania will be a couple of my examples. I might also use Connecticut because I used to live in Connecticut. But anyway, I'll try to stick to what you guys are more interested in. Okay, so you might use either Florida, only subscribe to Florida materials, or Pennsylvania materials, or New York materials. And that, of course, is going to be a whole lot less per month. So whatever is in your plan, that's what you get. You don't have to worry about paying extra for. What you're looking at on this handout is what you would pay extra for if you went outside your plan. So if we only went with the New York materials, if you did decide you wanted to search Florida statutes, you'd pay extra, whatever is listed here for primary materials. If you didn't get secondary sources in your plan, or you only had your jurisdiction secondary sources, so say you're in New York and you decided you wanted to look at Florida jurisprudence, a great resource, by the way. I think there's also a Pennsylvania jurisprudence. Not sure about that, but might be Pennsylvania practice. Anyway, if you wanted to look at that, but you only had New York, you would pay extra, and you would look on the secondary sources, and you would see where that fell in here, which is actually difficult to tell. But for instance, if you didn't get secondary sources and you wanted to look at a law review document, for that single law review document, you pay $85 if that wasn't in your plan. So that's how the cost works. It works pretty much the same on Lexis and Westlaw. They charge for searching a little bit differently, and frankly, they're always changing it, and they make it, I think, as complex as possible, so you try not to think about it. Both Lexis and Westlaw will tell, oh, most everything is in your plan, and you never have to worry about it. You need to worry about it. So what you want to do, and Eli, I'll answer your question in a moment, the one thing you want to do, and if you learn nothing else in this course, and I'm saying that the very first day, if you learn nothing else in this course, wherever you wind up, find out what's in your plan. And then just think about it. If it's secondary sources and you can dive in and you can look at all the law reviews and the treatises and the ALRs, great. But if you can't, be very careful. Lexis and Westlaw are good about letting you know, hey, this document isn't in your plan. And for those of you who do the extra credit, you'll see a little screenshot of what that looks like. So you will get warning. But seriously, one of the best pieces of research advice I can give you, find out what's in your plan. If you go to one of the huge, gigantic firms in New York, you may not have to worry about it. But if you're not, and you're in a smaller firm, you will have to worry about it. So Eli and then Danielle.
So if you
go ahead.
Yeah, so if you are, let's say you are, you can practice in Florida and New York. Is there a way to do like a multi-state package?
Yeah, absolutely. They'll slice it and dice it pretty much any way you want. Just have a good understanding of what's in there in terms of secondary sources and other materials. But that's just a negotiation. One thing I will say, I say when it's in your contract, you can use as much as you want. I talk with a lot of law firm librarians, so I'm always interested in how this works. I actually am going to attend a webinar if I can work it out on the new cost structure of Westlaw, and if I learn anything good, I'll let you know. But one thing that they used to do, I don't know if they still do, is depending on how much the firm or organization uses of within the plan might affect what monthly price they negotiate for the following year's plan. So you still don't want to spend, I was joking about spending 24/7 on Bloomberg, you still don't want to do that within your plan on Lexis and Westlaw. Again, find out about your plan. If you're lucky, in my humble opinion, and work for an organization that has a librarian, he or she will know. If you're not quite as lucky, again, in my humble biased opinion, find out whoever the managing partner is or whoever does the Lexis Westlaw contract, find out how the plan works, how the negotiation works, to find out just how you want to think about your usage of these resources, because it can add up. Think about it. Every time you click on a document, it costs $85. And then delivery, there's a delivery charge you can see there. That's going to cost more. And delivery means not just printing. Delivery means email and downloading. Danielle, did you have a question? Or okay, you were just stretching. Okay, so that's Westlaw. Lexis pretty much works the same way. You can see the handout. There's a link to this on the course website, Lexis Pricing Guide. Honestly, I find this even more confusing to understand than the Westlaw one. But somewhere, if you turn to, I think it's on the second page of your handout, you get a little bit of a sense of, so standard content, single document retrieval. I'm on the second page, not quite halfway down. $24 per link. Depending on what it is, it could be higher. Secondary sources tend to be the most expensive. And the premium treatises, remember I told you about NIMR on copyright as the treatise to go to for IP? NIMR on copyright is extraordinarily expensive if it is out of your plan on Lexis. Again, you can't get it on Westlaw. Westlaw has its own premium titles as well. And again, on Westlaw too, the secondary, very, very popular, librarians always recommend titles are going to be the most expensive, right? The most popular thing they're going to charge more for. That's capitalism. So again, think of what you really, the bottom line is, number one, like I said, and I'll repeat this hopefully 100 more times, know your plan. Second thing is, when you're using secondary sources, just be very careful. Again, not here. Not here. Doesn't cost anybody. We pay huge amount of dollars for everybody to use it as much as they want. I think it was Professor Stein. Any of you have Professor Stein for legal writing? No? Well, she, with her students, at least she used to, I don't know if she does anymore, refers to Lexis and Westlaw as crack. They give you everything you want while you're in law school, so you get hooked, and then that way you spend a whole lot of money with them once you're out of law school and you have to pay for it. So right now, use it, but just be informed when you do wind up working for an organization that it isn't free anymore. Questions? Okay, so as I mentioned, the extra credit goes into more detail about this. You'll see those nice screenshots. Again, if you have any trouble accessing it, let me know. Lexis Classroom is new for me as well. I've tested it, but never know what weird things can happen. Does everybody have Lexis and Bloomberg registered so that you can log into them? If not, I have a couple of registration cards here for you. Come see me after we're done, and I'm happy to give you one. Please make sure, especially with Lexis, to do so ASAP, because again, we've got our course website there, and that's where the screencasts for next week are posted, and I'll be posting the assignments there, and there are useful websites there, so all sorts of good stuff in my humble opinion. Again, that's organized by modules. So those screencasts I told you about are in the secondary sources module. Please watch screencast 1 and 2 for next week and answer the questions. That is not extra credit, that is to get us started on secondary sources. So we will be jumping off from talking about what those screencasts relate to you. Any questions about any of that or anything else that I have gone over?
On the right, the cloud and the little settings, that's for you, right? Because I don't see that on me.
If you don't see it on yours and you see it on me, then yes. I'm not sure which cloud and little
Like
settings.
the little green checkbox.
Oh,
on the
this?
right. No, all the way to the right.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, it's when you're pointing, so I'm going in that direction. Yes, that's for me. That's telling me that's posted. I can show you your view back here. Okay, so back here, this is the student view. And basically, I'm building this out for classes into the future, and I don't want to confuse you all with all of that. So I don't have everything visible to you yet. So this is what you see. So back in modules, and again, in the intro course documents module, that's where you'll find the extra credit. And in the secondary sources module, which is here, and again, you open and close here just by clicking on the arrow. So in secondary sources, that's where you see the screencast pages, and when you click on those pages, you'll see the links to the actual screencast and the questions that you need to answer for each one. So you need to do 2 of them for next time. And just by way of interest, back here, one thing I like about the Lexis Classroom is it has this calendar feature. So you can kind of see as due dates come up, Lexis automatically just puts them in the calendar for you. Which, if you find useful, great. If don't, you can ignore it. Whoops, why did it do that to me? That wasn't very nice of it. Let's go back to the calendar. And so as you can see, I'm still learning my way, navigating around. But it gives you the coming up here, which I kind of like as well. And again, once I take care of this recording, it'll be posted through this link on YouTube. Other questions? So occasionally we'll get out a little early, but that won't happen every week, unfortunately. So enjoy it when it does. And I will see you all next Tuesday. Same bat time, same bat channel, if any of you get that reference. And again, please ask questions on screencasts or whatever else you have. And let me know if you need help signing into Lexis or Bloomberg or Westlaw, because we will be using all three of them next week.